right, guys, welcome back. White Widow Sports. We are kicking off a new series of videos. This is something that Brian and I have talked about a lot recently and wanted to get you something. It's June at the time we're recording this, but football never sleeps, certainly not in our households, not in the world. And even though it's June and a lot of people aren't really thinking about football, we certainly are. So, what we want to do is we want to go through all 32 teams in the NFL, go over what happened with them last year, what's been going on this offseason, the draft, and kind of like a season preview of what we think their 2025 seasons could look like. Now, Brian, this was one thing that you and I had agreed on that we were going to set all personal biases aside. This is not going to be a video series about how much we like or dislike certain teams. But why don't you go ahead and tell everybody who we're starting off with? I'm sure they'll already know based off the thumbnail, but who and why we started with this specific team.
So, yeah, we're going to start off in the AFC West. So, should be a fun series. Looking forward to it. The team we're going to start off with on this first video is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's a good place to start. Good players, good team. So we'll get into it and we'll pop up on the offense first.
Yeah, and it's one of those teams where there's always a lot to talk about when you talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. Good, bad, and ugly. They're a polarizing team because they're kind of the new dynasty in football. We have seen just coming off of a 15-2 record. They were first in the division, first in the conference, got the first round bye. Kind of a down year for the Chiefs when you look at kind of some of their numbers and advanced metrics, and they still went to the Super Bowl. So if that's a down year for them, I mean, I don't think that they're slowing down anytime soon, which we'll get into. But we did not see the three-peat come to fruition that a lot of people predicted. But don't let that stop you from thinking that Kansas City is going to be right back in the mix this coming year.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they had a 15-2 record last year. Again, they are the new dynasty right now. They are the Patriots of late, and yeah, I agree. I don't see a whole lot changing this year. Do you have any free agency departures?
Yeah, and they actually
might hurt them or help them.
They actually had some big ones. So Joe Tooney is probably the biggest one. He is an all-pro level. I don't know if he's ever actually been all-pro. I want to say he was at some point in his career, but he is certainly that caliber of player on the offensive line. Everything that Kansas City does, it requires them to have the proper protection. And so when you lose a player like that, obviously you're going to feel the effects of it. Justin Reed is a safety. He's been kind of an enforcer on the backside of their defense, allows them to do a lot of different things in that Spagnuolo defense. He's off to New Orleans. And then Tershawn Wharton is another big one. Big defensive tackle, went to the Carolina Panthers. That's somebody that, as Chris Jones continues to age, Wharton was a big part of that defense. And I think that's a substantial loss. But they also had some key additions. So they brought in Jerry Tillery from Minnesota. That's another defensive tackle, kind of to help Chris Jones replace that Wharton void that was created by his departure. Elijah Moore and Jalen Moore both came. I'm sorry, Elijah Mitchell and Jalen Moore both coming over from San Francisco. Offensive tackle. I think he was the backup last year in San Francisco. They brought him in to be their new left tackle. If you watch that Super Bowl, you know that their offensive line was in shambles going against that Eagles defense. And so improving that protection to make that offense work was paramount for them. And then they brought in another backup running back. Pacheco was, I think, a 6th or 7th round pick. He's only pretty much there one more year, I think, and hasn't always been the healthiest of backs. So bringing in another productive running back who's had some health issues of his own, it just keeps the offense going. So free agency, I think, was a big thing for the Chiefs. They created some holes, but they also filled some. Big thing for them, talking about their offensive line, they re-signed their center, Creed Humphrey. I believe he is the highest paid center in the league. And then they also used their franchise tag on Trey Smith. So essentially they were at risk of losing the entire interior of their offensive line between Tooney, Humphrey, and Smith. They brought 2 of those 3 back. So that was very, very big for them to bring those guys back and at least get some continuity on their offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like they had a pretty productive offseason. Um, what about re-signings? Any notable re-signings? I think you just talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, Humphrey and Smith, those were the two big ones. I mean, every team will re-sign some backups, guys that were there, contributors, special teams, stuff like that. But as far as the notable names that people are going to know and care about, to me, it's Humphrey and Smith. It's shoring up that offensive line. And as we move to the draft, you'll see that that was another big investment that they made there. So if you're good with that, I'll go ahead and start talking about their draft picks and kind of what they added to the team that way.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going to go next. Was moving into their draft picks. How well do you think they did overall before we get into their picks? Just if you were to grade it, what kind of grade would you give them on draft day?
It's really hard to do draft grades. I've never been a big fan of grading drafts because I feel like you got to give a draft class 3 years before you even know what you've got out of some of these players. But at the I can't really stress this enough. At the base level, the draft is all about you have needs and how do you address those needs. Now, I agree that there's, value and stuff like that. Sometimes you'll take a player that maybe somebody says wasn't a need, but just represented a tremendous value. And I get that as well. But if you go into the draft with needs, it's kind of your last chance to really fulfill those needs and get yourself ready. It's your last chance to add talent at a place where you might have been lacking in that. So another thing is teams that have a top 10 draft pick, they get the sexy names. They get the names that everybody wants to add to their team. That's what all the scouting reports and videos are. Who's going to get this person? Who's going to draft Ashton Genty? I mean, that was kind of the hot name this year. And we'll talk about him in the same division, of course. But the Chiefs aren't going to have a top 10 pick unless they trade for one. Not with this regime, not with this offense. I mean, you would almost have to have like a Peyton Manning broken neck Colts season to end up with a top 10 pick. And even then, I'm not sure if they couldn't have a backup quarterback come in and pilot the offense, not to the level that Patrick Mahomes does, but at least be a middle of the road team fighting for a playoff spot. But that being said, Chiefs for drafting as late in the rounds as they do, I think they did a pretty solid job. I'd give them a B overall, just looking at what they did, because what the Chiefs do is they understand their strengths and they keep them strong. But in the first round, I talked about how big of a weakness they had on the offensive line. They signed a new left tackle from San Francisco, but then they also drafted one. Josh Simmons is a tackle out of Ohio State. A lot of people thought he could be a top 15 pick. He falls to them to pick 31. And now you've got a competition for left tackle. May the best man win. They're going to want that blindside protector for Patrick Mahomes to be the best thing that they can find. And so that's obviously a good thing. You don't have an incumbent. You have a true competition, a camp battle that a lot of people have eyes on. Second round, they took Omar Norman Lott. He's a defensive tackle out of Tennessee. I talk about Wharton leaving, bringing Jerry Tillery in. He's not a young guy himself, and certainly not Chris Jones. When Jones has been in and out of the lineup, that defense is night and day different. So bringing in another contributor for that interior defensive line is going to be big for them. And I think Norman Lott is a good one to add to that group. And then my other two favorite picks that I want to bring up is all about their offense. It's Jalen Royals, a wide receiver out of Utah State, and Brashard Smith, a running back out of SMU. Speed kills in the NFL, and nobody understands it or utilizes it the same way Kansas City does. So bringing in another running back that can score from 90 yards out, and Brashard Smith can. He is a receiving threat. You can do a lot of things with him. Jalen Royals, whereas I don't think you'll see a lot of contributions from him this year because there are so many more established guys ahead of him. It's basically just them keeping the cupboard full. If somebody gets hurt, guess what? They've got another one. You don't get to rest against the Chiefs because they're going to be taking shots. They're going to be explosive this year. That's kind of been their offseason motto. I don't know if you've read a lot into it, but their big thing was they were not happy with their performance as a team last year. They were, I don't want to say conservative, but they weren't as risky. They weren't as explosive. They didn't take the same shots that they were known for taking earlier on in Patrick Mahomes' career. They want to get back to that. And so having these weapons added to their arsenal, I think is just going to keep them in the threat of scoring on any given play and stressing defenses in ways that you just can't keep up with.
Yep, I agree. And I'm hoping, obviously Kelsey's on the back end of his career, but I'm hoping bringing in some of these young guns, some of the speed, defenses are going to have to keep up with that. So it may open him up for kind of what he's been known for, which is the little short dump passes and then making something happen after the catch. So
Yeah.
um, I'm looking forward to seeing if he returns to some of that. I know with a lot of the Swift fans and getting into football with this team, they really want to see him make big plays. Not, I guess, for like we would enjoy it, but more in okay, that's Taylor Swift's boyfriend. We know who that is. So hopefully that you will see a little bit of a resurgence on him, even though he is on the back end of his career. Um, what do you got for predictions? What do you think they're going to do this year?
Yeah, I mean, I know you personally are not a big fan of predicting records necessarily. There are going to be teams that are good and bad, but like I said, this was a 15-2 team. That is a record that would not be easy to replicate. But I got them coming close. I don't think that we'll see a 17-0 team or anything like that. But if they could get 14-3, I think they're going to continue to be the top team in their division, barring significant injuries and stuff like that. But I think they're going to be right back in the hunt. I think that they are one of the premier teams in the NFL, and nothing this offseason has, uh, since the Super Bowl, nothing in this offseason would make me think, looking at their roster, looking at the team and the way that it's composed, that they're not going to be one of the best teams in the league again. And just because that Super Bowl went the way that it did does not and should not detract anybody's belief in Kansas City as a contender. They are probably, and I haven't looked at this, but they are probably the betting favorite to win the Super Bowl next year if you were to check Vegas odds right now.
Sure, and I agree with that. I too would have them at a 13, 14, 15 game win this year. So I don't see it any different. I do think obviously in this conference they've done, some of the other teams, the Broncos, the Raiders have made big improvements over the last couple of years. So I think this is shaping up to be one of the tougher conferences in the NFL. So it's going to be fun to see, but I agree with you. I don't think you'll see just a complete blowout, but I do think they're one of the stronger teams in the entire NFL. So I wouldn't be shocked to see 14 or 15 wins.
Yeah, you mentioned 13 a second ago, and it's crazy to think that my initial thought when you said the number 13 was that sounds kind of low. I mean, if you have a 13-4 record, and somebody says, I don't think they're going to lose 4 games, like that's just a testament to the respect that this team gets, and it's
Yeah,
all I think earned. I mean, I'm by no means a Chiefs fan, but you have to respect the type of football that they can play. They can beat you in a number of different ways, and I don't think that's going anywhere this year. And talking about their division, kind of a little bit of a spoiler alert, but if we're sitting here predicting records for these 4 teams within this division, this could be one of those rare instances where all 4 teams have a winning record.
yeah,
I do not currently have any of these 4 teams pegged to have a losing record this season. So be interesting to see how it plays out and who meets or exceeds expectations or who might come up a little bit short.
sure. So do you have any strengths, weaknesses for this year?
Yeah, I think biggest strength for Kansas City is obviously going to be Mahomes and his receiving weapons. This team, despite how good their defense can be, I think it gets overlooked. Even last year, as a 15-2 team, a lot of the talk around Kansas City was they just didn't look right, and that was all offensive struggles. They won a lot of one-score games, and that kind of propped up their record. They were undefeated at home last year at Arrowhead. That's something that you don't see very often. So as good as their defense has been, and I think will continue to be, this team is going to live and die. They're going to be known by how good their offense is or isn't. You look at Rashee Rice coming back from the injury that he suffered last year, Xavier Worthy coming into his second year, Hollywood Brown hopefully being healthy, Travis Kelce running it back for one more year. There's a lot of talk this year that he was going to retire. Like I
Mhm.
said, you've got Pacheco. You just brought in Brashard Smith, Jalen Royals. This is a full arsenal of pass catchers, and they can do so much You talked about getting the ball into Kelsey's hands. Using him more and more as a decoy the older he gets can still be effective. I mean, in my head, I can just picture them running a lot of sideways motions, faking a little dump off tight end screen to Kelsey. That whole defense is going to go to him. And then what happens when Patrick Mahomes keeps it, boots around, and then throws a 60-yard shot to an Xavier Worthy, and there's nobody within 15 yards of him? This is just the kind of dynamic weaponry that Kansas City has that a lot of teams can't boast. So I think
Sure.
that's got to be their biggest strength, is just that core of offensive weapons. But they aren't without concerns. I think their offensive line, having a lot of new faces coming in, that competition for left tackle, there's no guarantee that they get a true winner. We have seen teams that bounce back and forth between a couple of options. Let's say they start the rookie because he looked good in training camp or preseason, then the season starts and he starts giving up 2-3 sacks. They're going to yank him pretty quickly because you can't play with Patrick Mahomes like that. And so they're going to put the veteran that they signed in free agency in there. Let's say he doesn't do so good. Maybe he finishes that game okay, but then the next, now you start seesawing. You're lacking chemistry, you're lacking continuity, and that can be huge. Offensive lines have to gel. They have to know what each other is thinking or doing. They have to be able to communicate with each other. And so I think having, Humphrey and Trey Smith back, I think helps. Having Juwan, I think it's Juwan Johnson. No, can't remember their right tackle's name currently, but he's going to be back. That right side of the line is staying where it's supposed to be. Left side, if they can get it hammered out, they can be very good. But that's their big concern for me right now, is making sure that offensive line doesn't look the same way it looked during the Super Bowl, where they were completely overmatched.
Yeah, and I think that's why I put them down to, only getting 12 or 13 wins. Is that offensive line? It's untested, it's unproven. They could come out and shock the world and just be the best offensive line we've ever seen, or they could just be trash. So you don't know, and because you don't know, I get it. Mahomes is probably one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the game right now. You can't ever count him out for sure, but a quarterback is only as good as his line. So I think we saw that with the Jets last year. With Aaron Rodgers, he is a great quarterback for sure, but he is also up there in age, and their line kind of just didn't protect him, not like they should have. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what the Chiefs do coming up and how well they do gel. One last question for the Chiefs is, with us being big fantasy guys, love playing fantasy, and you're a lot more into it than I am. Do you have anybody you want to put on your roster? Obviously Worthy is one. Mahomes is always a good candidate for a quarterback. Who are your standout players to go on your fantasy football league roster?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Kind of talking what we were speaking of a moment ago with the offensive line. This is a team that can make stuff happen without perfect protection, but imagine they do have perfect protection. The stuff that this offense can do could be special. And if that's the case, I want every Chief I can get my hands on. If Rashee Rice comes back and starts putting up the same numbers that he was doing at the beginning of last year before his injury, he could be a league winner for what you're paying for him. If you can get him in the 4th or 5th round and he's your 2nd or 3rd receiver on your roster, I mean, he could put up wide receiver 1 numbers. Xavier Worthy's the type of player that can basically put up the points that you expected him to put up for the game. He can do that in one play. He can take a 70, 80-yard pass to the crib at any point in time. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, there are a few quarterbacks that are better than him, especially if that offense shows the improvements that they're talking about. If they can be more explosive, they can take more of those shots and they actually hit. Mahomes is going to put up points in bunches. And then obviously Kelsey. Kelsey is somebody that at his position, there are a few difference makers. Now, would I rather have Kelsey over a Brock Bowers? Of course not. But the things that he still does at his age, what he means to that offense, if he can get back to the health and utilization. I think a lot of people forget that he was kind of banged up entering last year. And they said, we're going to take it easy on Kelsey. We're not going to utilize him much. We're going to try to save him for the back half of the season, the playoffs. Well, then Rashee Rice got hurt. Hollywood Brown got hurt. Isaiah Pacheco got banged up. They had to rely on him throughout the season more than they wanted to. And it was a career low in touchdowns and I believe yards as well for Kelsey, dating all the way back to his rookie year. So I think he's still got some left in the tank. I don't think he's going to be what we think of when we think about Kelsey at the peak of his dominance. But he can still be one of the few difference makers at the tight end position in fantasy, especially in PPR leagues where you get just a point for him catching the ball. He doesn't have to be 30 yards downfield to put up points. He's going to catch touchdowns. He's going to get the attention of Patrick Mahomes because he always does.
Sure. Well, guys, thank you for joining us for the talk on Kansas City. Again, we're going to do all 32 teams. So, hopefully we get to your favorite team here shortly, but we will get to them 100%. So, again, thank you for watching, and